Well, thanks for coming, guys. My name is Lindsay Heath. I'm a neuropsychologist and a school psychologist. So I'm here to talk about transitioning into adulthood after TBI. So I don't claim to be an expert about every single thing we're going to cover, but I wanted to kind of give a broad sweep of just kind of things to have on your radar, resources to keep in mind, and steps to consider as you're making that transition. I think your questions are more important, so I would address what you would address, so feel free to interrupt me at any time or ask questions or correct me if I don't know what I'm saying. I have a handout here that I'll give you at the end. If we don't have enough of them, I can have a little sign up and I'll email it to you. We just have a few copies, but the handout covers all of the resources that are in the presentation. Like if I'm referencing the agency, this will have the contact information for each thing in there, so that if I don't have the answers, you'll know where to find them. Okay, is there anything in particular that anyone wants to make sure we talk about? All right, well, away we go. So the point of this discussion is to explore options and resources to help with the transition from childhood and adulthood, and also to help with the transition from graduation to kind of what's the next steps after that. So the next steps in education, if you went to Kelly Jones's talk, you probably heard some of this information already.
We didn't make it to the transition part. Okay. Perfect segue.
We're picking up, all right. So at age 18, the educational rights transfer to the student. So a student may still be in school, and the parent all along has been signing the ARD documents and the IEP and agreeing to all the services. That power of decision-making transfers to the student at age 18. There are steps you can take if you want to remain, as the parent, you want to remain the decision maker, but you'll need to provide guardianship, power of attorney, or a supported decision-making document. And we'll talk about the differences between those things in a little bit. But overall, the student can now make their own decisions about transportation, any kind of training they're going to want at school. If they want daily living skills or vocational skills training, they have the right to accept or reject those services once they're 18. So there are lots of options for education after age 18 or after the graduation. If a student has an individualized education program, meaning they're getting accommodations or special education services, that has to be documented, and they have to have met all graduation requirements to continue. So they've graduated, but they can now keep going to school. This is now more geared towards like vocational services or life skills training, like working on adaptive skills, also some leisure skills and kind of exploring hobbies and that sort of thing. So rather than focusing on academics like they did prior to graduation, they're now working on the transition to adulthood. And in fact, Eanes actually calls their program Transition to Adulthood. Here in Austin, it's called the GO Project. So that program can help actually set up employment. They can help do job training to get the child, now adult, ready to work, but they also can help place them somewhere or supervise their work until they're out of the program and they're maintaining employment on their own. Does anybody have any questions about this transitional post-18 education within the public schools?
I haven't think of that. I forgot my talk. You can take advantage of the public school services until the age of 22.
Oh yes, thank you. I meant to put the end age on there. All right, so there are also lots and lots of options for post-secondary education, meaning going to like a vocational school or a 2-year or 4-year college. The main difference if you're transitioning from high school to post-secondary education is that the child, now adult, needs to be their own advocate as far as getting accommodations and that sort of thing. Whereas Child Find dictates that the school, when they're a child, has to find them and provide them the services. They have to be their own advocate once they're in the college level to get the accommodations that they'll need. So each campus will have some version of a student disability office that might be called a student accessibility office. And that's where you'll go to kind of start with the process of getting like extended time on tests. They can provide preferential seating, preferential scheduling so that you get in the right class that you want and get to be where you want to be in the class. They provide extended time for tests. You might be able to have tests that are in a closed room that's distraction-free. You can get copies of class notes. So Sometimes they'll pay another student to copy their class notes and provide it to the student that's getting that accommodations. So if you're interested in this process of getting accommodations in school, if it's for a traumatic brain injury, that typically, or I think probably any kind of brain injury, that's typically a letter or possibly a form filled out by either a neurologist or a neuropsychologist. Is usually all you need for documenting a brain injury. Any questions about that? I'm a very fast talker, so feel free to slow me down. Okay. So for employment, we all know employment can be a financial benefit, but there's lots of other benefits that the research has shown to working and to sustaining employment. Can help increase independence, help with self-esteem, gives it more access to social interaction that oftentimes a child who becomes an adult and has transitioned out of school, school is their primary access to socialization and being around other people their age. So employment can kind of step in and fill that gap. I believe everyone can work if we're open-minded about what work looks like. So, sure we all know not everybody has a full-time job, but there are plenty of part-time jobs. Volunteering is also an option. That's a work-like environment, but it's kind of lower stakes because you're very unlikely to get fired from a volunteer position. But it can also give that sense of purpose and help with self-esteem and that sort of thing. Employment first, and this is one of the things, this will all be on your handout. Employment first is a government-funded approach to try to include individuals with disabilities into the workforce. So they use integrated competitive employment as the first option. So they want you to start with, I'm going to be gainfully employed as the goal, but then they'll work with the individual from there and see what that could look like for them. So there are lots and lots of options for making work work. So that can include volunteering. There's lots and lots of places to volunteer around Austin. The shelters, like animal shelters, have lots of options for volunteering at various levels. So some volunteers will work at a high level of organization and managing everyone's schedule. Some people will go and pet the bunnies, and that's their job there. Nonprofits, schools, and churches can also provide volunteering experience that feels like a typical workplace and can sometimes help people in the transition from school, and then they'll volunteer to kind of get some work-like experience before actually going into the paid workforce. Schools can also provide on-campus internships or off-campus placements. So oftentimes, like the GO project or an adaptive, like an adult transition program out of school, they might find you a job, you're working while you're in school, and that's actually been shown to predict success once you're out of school. To have that experience while you're in school, kind of supervised and coached and trained, you're more likely to be able to sustain a job after graduation. A vocational adjustment coordinator or job coach can also help with that. Sometimes schools will provide that. Sometimes Texas Workforce provides that. And they're coming up next. And the school can often work with Texas Workforce to kind of coordinate services from the school, and then Texas Workforce can kind of pick up where they left off. So the Texas Workforce Commission, has everyone heard of this agency? Okay. So they used to be called DARS, it was the Department of Assistive and Rehabilitative Services. DARS kind of broke in half. So they had two programs. One was comprehensive rehab, which is just providing therapy and treatment and medicine to help get someone better. And then they have a vocational program. And in the vocational program, they're working on job readiness and then job placement and job maintenance. So their goal is to get someone into the workforce and be able to keep the job. So they'll work with anyone who is referred with a disability to, they might provide therapy to help get the person ready. I work in a home and community-based neurorehab place, and we often will work with Texas Workforce to help people know how to run their schedule, how to dress appropriately for their job, to problem solve anything that may need to be problem solved. Like I've worked in the basement of a hotel helping somebody who had trouble with their hand dexterity be able to pull towels out of the machine and get them folded, and do that quickly. And so working with the team to kind of problem solve those things.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
If your child has been working with Texas workforce, and then they find a job on their own,
Mm-hmm.
then can we go back to the Texas workforce and ask for a job coach or not?
Absolutely, yes. Okay. Often in my rehab therapy that I'm doing, I'm working on cognitive therapy, and so sometimes I'll use those job search activities as the cognitive therapy. Like, we need to plan this out, organize a system for keeping track of where you've interviewed. We'll work on interview skills, and we'll work in conjunction with Texas workforce. So it's often the individual who actually found themselves the job, and then Texas workforce will help provide the support if needed. Whether it be like a therapist to be able to go with them to work for a little while, or a job coach functions much the same way. Like, how do we set up your desk, or how do we set up the environment so that you can function at your best and sustain the job? So often Texas workforce can help kind of with job explorations, and they have certain connections in town that they know certain places are more likely to hire somebody with a brain injury, but they don't have to be the one to find the job. They can still provide the supports after. They also can provide like driving evaluations. If driving to work is an issue, they'll help with that process, or adaptive equipment that might be necessary. So if somebody needs a computer with a bigger screen to be able to do their job, or some kind of adaptive equipment to be able to like manipulate things, or voice dictation, those sorts of things, they can provide some of that equipment. So they're a very good resource for somebody trying to get their way into the workforce. They start with kind of an intake interview where you talk about goals. With adults, most of the time, the goal is, I want to do what I was doing, but they'll help kind of guide that. It can be anything. I think the only thing they won't agree to is self-employment. They won't support you being self-employed because it's not as stable. But they will help you reach whatever goal. They can also provide education. If someone who was a massage therapist hurt their arm, but now they need to do, medical coding, they can pay for a medical coding program. So that's just a good resource to keep in mind, and once again, it's on your list here. Do you guys have any more questions about employment or TWC? Okay. I wish I knew the ages of all your kids. Would help me know what to focus on.
17, with
Okay.
spastic quadriplegia, nonverbal. He'll be a tough one to place.
Okay. Yeah. Probably could benefit from a lot of these resources, so make sure you get one of these. So for medical care, similarly to how the educational rights transfer to an 18-year-old, the same thing happens with medical care. Parents are very used to calling and setting up the doctor's appointments and inquiring about medications and answering all the questions and getting all the information at those appointments. Once they're 18, you can't call the doctor's office and have them just tell you what you want to know, unless your child has given them permission. So there's a few ways to do that. Sometimes there's just a consent form that the office itself has. Like, you might see it just in your initial paperwork. Who are we allowed to talk to about your medical information, and the individual signs. But you can also go through the guardianship or medical power of attorney or supported decision-making process and provide that documentation to the office, meaning that you are allowed to know all of the medical information. If you're not going to go those routes where you're going to still be in charge of the medical information, it can be helpful to kind of train your child how to be in charge of their own medical care before 18, so they kind of have the practice. And so that could be practicing taking notes during a doctor's appointment, practicing planning a list of questions so you don't forget during the doctor's appointment, answering the questions yourself, providing feedback yourself, just kind of practicing those things in advance. And another thing to keep in mind that I think is often overlooked is if you have pediatric providers, you want to check with them to see how long they will see your child. Because often providers kind of have a cutoff age, like, okay, I'll see you a little past 18, but if you're 22, you gotta find somebody else. And you can ask them for referrals. Usually pediatric providers have a list of referrals within their own discipline that they can send you to as an adult provider. But just keep it in mind that the pediatric people won't see you forever necessarily. Okay, so also thinking along the lines of medical care, it's good to learn the details of your insurance plan. Your child can now stay on your plan until 26, which is nice for many, many people. But they can also petition to extend that coverage past 26. So that has to be done within a month of their 26th birthday if you want them to still be covered under your plan and not have to seek out their own insurance plan, which we've all probably learned insurance companies are not the easiest people to work with, so keeping them on your plan is often the easiest way to go. Star Plus is another resource on your list here. It's a Texas Medicaid managed care program for people with disabilities. So what they do is provide Medicaid health care, but then they also can provide other long-term supports. So what those long-term supports and services could look like could be help in the home with basic things. They can provide caregivers. They can also provide short-term caregivers, like if the individual is living with their parents, but the parents need to go out of town for a week, they can bring somebody in to relieve them in the care. This is all through the Health and Human Services website, so if you're interested in the Star Plus program, that would be the place to look. And you've got that info here too. Okay, so as far as other healthcare options, other than just hanging out on your own workplace insurance plan, Medicaid is acquired through SSI, Medicaid is through SSDI, so depending on which of those routes you go, we'll place you under Medicaid or Medicare. And we'll talk about kind of how to pick your route in a second here. Medical buy-in provides healthcare for people who work, but you also then pay a premium. So it's not full coverage because you do have income, but they will help you. The health insurance premium payment program, so that 5 times fast, is for families if you have one person in the family who's on Medicaid, but you also have access to a work-based insurance program, they can plug you into that route. And Community First Choice is a federal option where the states are allowed to provide a home care attendant or a caregiver. And this provides supports to Medicaid recipients. So, if this is all a little bit mind-boggling, which it completely is to me, and many of the people that I work with, if you call 211, they can kind of help point you down the right path. So if you say, this is my situation, I have this level of income, this many people in my house, this is the disability we're dealing with, this is their work, and this is their expenses, they'll kind of help point you in the right direction. Okay. So,
I have a question. Go back to that. So can you have Medicaid and Medicare for that one person?
I don't think so. I don't believe so. I think it's one or the other, depending on kind of what path you go down. Because different people qualify for the different programs. So, other income options, and these income options also relate to your healthcare options that we just discussed. You would want to apply for supplemental security income the month your child turns 18. That's a federal income supplement. It's funded by tax revenue, and it's for people with little to no income. So probably a limited or non-existent work history, and a low income or no income. This is kind of the path for those folks. So I'll give you the number to call in the website for them. To be able to get this for your child, if the child is still living in your home, you have to prove expenses. So someone living independently would just turn in all their bills and show their expenses. If the child is living in your home, then you'll add up all your expenses and divvy up those expenses based on how many people are in the house. So if you pay $100,000 a year and you have 5 people, you can say, this one pays $20,000 a year, and that's their fair share of the expenses, and they pay that, so that you're kind of making a case for needing the federal aid for that purpose.
Which won't be the 20,000, right?
No.
I would be 10,000 people.
If I'm being honest, I was trying to think of the easiest number to provide in my head. The numbers I threw out were totally unrealistic, but that was the easiest math I could do in front of a crowd. So that's SSI. SSD. What'd you say? Oh, sorry. SSDI is based on work history. So this is for someone who has acquired a disability, but they have a work history. And this is where you've probably heard about people like paying into the system. That's SSDI. So that money has come out of your paycheck. You've paid in. So then if something happens, you kind of have that there for you. So this can actually be based on the individual with the disabilities, work history, or the parents. So if they become disabled before the age of 22, they might be able to pull from the SSDI that their parents have paid in. Excuse me. And a child disability beneficiary, if they have a parent who's on Social Security, they'll get 50% of what the parent is getting if they're claiming under the parent. And all of these things too, the SSI and SSDI, and what income route is the best for you, the SSA.gov or calling 211 can also kind of route you down the right path and let you know where to apply and what would be the best option for you. I have seen people kind of qualify for both, like they could have gotten SSDI or SSI, and so you kind of want to maximize your benefit and pick which one. So 211 can kind of help guide you through that. So additional supports that you could consider are Health and Human Services. So this is kind of the place to start. So for all these educational and work and medical and legal and income and insurance options, if you just need a first place to start and somebody to call to say, where do I start this process, and what do I do first, and where do I go? You want to start with Health and Human Services. Give them a call. They used to be called DADS, just like TLC used to be called DARS. So they're the local intellectual and developmental disability authority, and their job is kind of to help point you in the right direction. So keep their number and their website handy because they can be very helpful in kind of guiding you in your next steps.
And how do you know what that authority is in your area? I mean, they're different organizations in each city, aren't they?
I think Health and Human Services is Texas. Yeah. And then they can route you to like your local office.
Okay. So
Like you probably have a branch, but the Health and Human Services covers the state. And they'll have some version of this in every state. But as long as you're in Texas, this website will work. It's just a good number to call. So other steps that you might want to consider, none of these are, not necessarily a fit for you, but just wanted to let you know kind of what legal options are out there as far as guardianship and such. So guardianship is kind of the most difficult route to go. You have to petition the court, there's often lawyer fees and court costs, and you have to make a case for being able to take over and make decisions for someone who is considered incapacitated. So it also involves proving that they're incapacitated and bringing that to the judge and making a case for that. Limited guardianship is kind of the next step down as far as level of difficulty to get it, but also limits kind of the level of power that you get from it. So that is just made through an agreement at a court appearance, so you just go once, you don't necessarily have to have a whole team of lawyers and doctors involved, and it just kind of spells out what the guardian has control over and not. Whereas guardianship, you just kind of have the control. Limited guardianship is, okay, you maybe have control over major surgical decisions, but everyday things the individual can handle themselves. Supporting decision-making is considered like an emerging concept. It's kind of new. Has anyone else heard of supportive decision-making? It's kind of new to me. I think I learned from your organization, actually, from parent to parent. about this. So it's kind of new, but this involves the parent or whoever wants to help in the important decision making. They're kind of signing an agreement with the individual that they're helping and kind of supporting the decisions. They can't make the decisions for them, but going to doctor's appointment and helping guide things or helping guide educational decisions. So you're not in charge of the decisions, but you're kind of the official authority for helping guide or inform and make sure the person knows kind of the consequences of the decisions and responsibilities. Power of attorney. So for that one, you have a form, you get it signed and witnessed and notarized. Power of attorney is actually like the easiest option, but you don't have as much power as a guardianship or limited guardianship. Lawyers will try to charge you for this service. You do not need to pay them for that. Lots of lawyers advertise for being able to set up a power of attorney. It's actually just a form online. You Google it and print it and fill it out. So don't pay people to do this for you. But it gives somebody legal authority to act on the individual with the disability's behalf. But the person with the disability at any moment can say, I want it back. The power of attorney is off. Like, I'm in charge of myself and my decisions now. So they have to kind of consent and say this is the deal, but they can revoke it also. Okay. Another thing that you could potentially consider as you're thinking about moving into adulthood is estate planning. So you could think about setting up a special needs trust that's kind of a way of protecting your assets and still giving you access to some of the federal and state funding programs, rather than having a bank account that's too big and they say you don't qualify, you have too much savings. You can put it in the special needs trust and still get access to those services, and it just kind of protects the money there. The Achieving a Better Life Experience program is fairly new. It was started by President Obama, and it allows people with disabilities who are diagnosed before 26 to have like a tax advantage savings account that's specifically kind of earmarked for expenses that are predicted to be associated with their disability. So if someone is in a wheelchair and they know 10 years from now they're probably going to need a new wheelchair, that money can go in a tax advantage savings account for later, as long as it's an expense associated with the disability they have. So I just wanted to throw out some additional resources. Texas Parent to Parent is an awesome place to go also if you just need a number to call and somebody to point you in the right direction. I have a bunch of pamphlets from them. This is their Pathways to Adulthood pamphlet, and they do workshops that basically are a really expanded version of this presentation. So we've talked for about half an hour. They will spend a day. Do I have that right?
Yes, a day.
Yeah.
You do a day.
So you can get a lot more detailed information from them, but kind of summarizing and throwing all these resources out there. Texas Project First is part of TEA, the Texas Educational Agency, and their whole point is to just give you information. So if you have a child or someone in your family with a disability, their whole purpose is to just talk to you, educate you, give you information, give you resources, give you the right numbers to call, and that sort of thing. They can probably guide kind of which path you go down in a lot of ways. And for any of kind of the benefit information that I've covered, or insurance options and medical options, yourtexasbenefits.com or 211 will have, like calling the number 211, will have all of that information and then probably additional resources that are hiding out there. So any of those three places would also be, in addition to just the Health and Human Services website, any of these three would also just be a good first number to call. Are you okay? Does anybody have any questions about some of these resources or anything? Or really anything else?
Have you ever called 211?
I have been with people while they're getting very frustrated and I'm having to use my
experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to get information from when you call 211.
It is. I like the websites because it's all there. You just have to dig for it.
Mm-hmm.
211, if you have the patience for it, they kind of already know the answers for you, but it can be a lengthy process. I have had to use my psych background to keep people calm through that process. And then it's the other kind of disadvantage of 211 is then it's up to you to be taking notes and keeping track of everything they tell you. Whereas if you go to your Texas benefits, it's all there and it's in writing and you can bookmark it and go back to it later. You don't have to be keeping track of everything that you're told yourself, which I work with a lot of adults with brain injuries, and that's often a challenge is they call 211 and then they aren't sure, or it's really confusing, or they couldn't write as fast as the person was talking, and so they would spend all that time on hold, and then the information evaporates somehow. So it is an option if you're not a computer person. It's the low-tech version. And they can also help with if you needed, like, your home adapted to be accessible, like they can point you towards getting a ramp that's like funded by taxes and that sort of thing. So they're a good bag of goodies, but just expect to be placed on hold. They can change your batteries in your smoke detector, all kinds of things. They want you to be safe and good, but it is sometimes quite a long. And a lot of being passed around through different people. So thank you. Does anybody have any other questions about any of this or neuro rehab?
I have a comment.
Okay.
There's also these Medicaid waiver programs, if you want to know those. Yeah, so that's another, and a lot of them are focused, so you don't have to be a recipient of Medicaid or Medicare, and they're, where the waiver part comes in, but they have like 7 or 8 waiver programs that have several year-long wait lists. But if you get on these programs, a lot of them are designed to help with this transition, with learning work skills or how to be an adult, help promote living as independent as you can. And it's also through Texas Health and Human Services. And there's one called CLASS that patients with brain injury, or sorry, kids with brain injuries benefit from. But if you think it might be something that's useful, I would look into it as soon as possible, because like I said, there's sometimes several years to access those waiver programs.
My daughter waited 22 years.
Yeah.
22 years. There's HCS and Texas Home Living and CLASS, but the list is long. I put
You
her
can
on
put yourself on
when
multiple
she was
lists.
first born.
So there's no harm in putting yourself on every list?
Yeah, and as you come up for one, you can take advantage of those services, but you can only take advantage of one at a time. So if you, some great, you've got to come up on another one, and then.
And if you move from county to county, you need to contact them, because otherwise you're taking off that county you were in, and you go on, and you're never placed on the county where you moved.
Oh, jeez. That sounds very frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, most of these services sign up whenever, like, don't wait until you're ready for the services, sign up for them. Even Texas Workforce Commission, it can take a long time for them to get the ball rolling, so you may want to think about that, like, senior year or the last year of school, rather than waiting to, okay, we're ready for a job. Like, get on their radar as soon as you can, because they can take a while. A lot of these things can take a while.
Do you have any information? My son is not going to hold down a 40-hour-a-week job, and so one of my, or even a 2-hour-a-week job probably, but filling his week with activities outside the home that aren't job related. So, you know, recreational, or, I mean.
Oh, here's a plug for you.
Please, anything.
I'm the president of an organization called the Small Victories Foundation.
Small Victories.
Mm-hmm. And part of the point of the foundation is to help people fill their lives and find fulfillment through creative experiences. So we provide like lessons, like piano classes, pottery, cooking, all sorts of different kind of, even yoga, tai chi, anything kind of creative. And if somebody needs transportation, like you can provide like Uber gift cards and that sort of thing to help. If someone is like more homebound and it's hard to get somewhere, we've sometimes gotten teachers to go to the home or set things up online. Like we have a music therapy class that's all online. You can see the other people and you can all play your instruments together and interact. We don't have to go anywhere. I think the class is actually, the teacher's in New York or California or something. She's nowhere around here. And it's all people with brain injuries. We have a choose on class that's kind of similar. You can all see each other, but and talk to each other if you don't have to go anywhere. So that's one option. It's for adults, but it sounds like he's going to be 18 any minute now. So hit up our table on the way out. We'll be back out there. I keep pointing at him. That's my cousin. He's also on the board of the foundation. He's wearing the shirt to the t-shirt. So that's one option. There's lots of good like volunteering type options. You might consider hooking up with a recreational therapist because that discipline is really aimed toward, all right, what can this life be? Even if you are going to work, still good to have like me time and hobbies and things, but especially for someone who's not going to work, to make their day more fulfilling, like learning a language or seeing what volunteering work, or figuring out what card game is appropriate for their level so that they can do something fun with a family member in the home. So recreational therapy would be a good place to start for that too. They can kind of help. They can figure out like adaptive bowling and have that be a weekly thing, and kind of fill up that space if it's not going to be filled with work. It's important to have like a sense of purpose, and increased activity is definitely a mood supporter. So the less you do, the less you want to do, and then don't do anything, and then you feel sad because you didn't do anything, and then you don't want to do anything. So it's kind of a cycle. If you don't fill that time, your mood can really go down. So being busier, no matter what it is, can be really fun.
Sure.
So call us. We'll get you set up with a class or something.
So are there limitations with those? Like, for example, so my son is about the same age, but he survived a drowning accident. And we actually just did a research study. And the research study on kids that were toddlers when they have survived a non-fatal drowning actually are cognitively intact. And their injury is limited to movement. And so like my son has very limited purposeful movement, and which also includes, he's still in a diaper. He's still, he can't do that, but he's cognitively aware. Now, the school system that I've had has been wonderful, because he's gone in with the school and they have a person there. Like, I don't have to send a nurse. I don't have to send anybody there. There's people there that take him around so he can be with his typically developing, peers, but they can also feed him, and change his diaper. When you have these programs, that's what I'm saying. It's like, okay, and I'm never a person to say never, but chances are that he's going to go work is, is pretty slim, but then keeping him in some kind of enriched environment, do most of them, would you still have to have somebody that's like an attendant there to make sure for a situation like that?
Usually, a lot of the adults with brain injuries that I work with, we work with all different levels of brain injuries. Some people are getting ready to go back to work. Some people were just trying to figure out through our program what their life could be. We often set up a caregiver of some kind. And some of these benefits will help.
You set up, or the person needs to?
Like, we will help the person with the brain injury or their family figure out how to get a caregiver. So some of these government programs, you can get a caregiver for a certain number of hours. Sometimes it's private paid, sometimes it's through an agency. So we just kind of help to figure out the best path for that, because having a caregiver can make such a huge difference in actually being able to participate in the community. But yeah, I don't think there's limitations to who could get out and participate if they have somebody who's able to help them with transitions and transportation and kind of facilitating whatever the activity is. There's lots of, Austin's a good town for like options for leisure and like community involvement kind of things. We have a lot of options here. But a caregiver can be a huge help. Anybody else? All right, well, thank you guys for coming. And feel free to hunt me down out there if any questions pop up.
Thank you.